Yeah. With you, no issues.
Okay, so I guess we go live now.
It is live.
So we'll wait for a moment for the participants to come in, then we get started. Okay, so we'll get started now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I, on behalf of NetApp, welcome you all to the webinar on the recent trends emerging in apprenticeship and the way forward. NetApp launched its biannual apprenticeship report, which had some fascinating trends emerging and also highlighted the areas for improvement for the effective implementation of apprenticeships. Pandemic did have an impact on apprenticeship engagement, but that did not dampen the employer sentiment. There is a 33% net positive outlook for apprentices hiring, with 46% of the employers having intent to engage with apprenticeship, which is a very commendable thing to mention. Major reasons cited are to offset the scarcity of workforce due to pandemic, increase in demand for the essential goods and services, and also to optimize the talent cost by investing in talent creation. About 78% of the employers find apprentices highly productive. There's a gender neutrality in hiring apprentices, making way for women to take up apprentices in male dominated job roles and the roles emerging in the services sector. Also, services sector continues to make progress in engaging with apprentices, though still little behind the manufacturing sector. Even agriculture sector is emerging in these is emerging with a positive outlook for apprenticeship hiring. The pandemic and its impact has led to 54% of the employers to either stay away or to tone down the apprenticeship engagement for H2. The most glaring shortcoming are that 26% of the employers did not see value in apprenticeships, and 22% employers weren't aware of the system and mechanism of implementation for apprenticeships, which states the gap between the intent and the reality. We will deliberate on these trends today and look at the way forward to overcoming the shortcomings in the system and to build on degree-linked apprenticeship under the new education policy, which sets the tone for apprenticeship in the 21st century. Today we have with us Ms. Sabina Diwan, who is the President and Executive Director of Just Jobs Network, which is an innovative international think tank focused on finding strategies to create more and better employment worldwide. Along with her, we have Mr. Jan Eben, who is the Senior Head Apprenticeship Division, NSDC. He promotes industry engagement and advises on international best practices in vocational education and training. We also have with us Mr. Ranganath N. Krishna, who is the Grundfos Water Ambassador at the Grundfos Pumps India Private Limited. Prior to this, he was the Managing Director of the Grundfos Pumps since its inception in 1998. He also heads the CII Skill South chapter. Welcome all of you and thank you for being part of this session to share your views on the trends on apprenticeship. We look forward to your insights and recommendation to make apprenticeships effective. Great. So, Sabina, I would like to begin with you since you have done, been working extensively in building strategies to create more and better employment. Would you please share with us the overview of India labor market and the impact that apprenticeship could make in channelizing youth toward formal employment?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Sumit. It's really an honor to be on a panel with such experienced and seasoned experts on this subject. So let me start by just kind of giving an overview of the labor market in India, because I think underpinning the need and imperative of apprenticeships is this backdrop of an ailing labor market. So we know that even before COVID hit, the Indian labor market was already showing signs of distress. Just to take you through a few numbers, unemployment had already upticked from around 3% to 6.1% pre-COVID and is now settled around somewhere around 8.1%. Youth unemployment in 2017, 2018, the periodic labor force survey was already 3 times that of the general unemployment rate. So general was 6.1, youth was 17.8%. And now has gone up to, over 1 in 4. So around 26% of young people between the ages of 15 to 29 being unemployed. Non-farm informal employment was around 83% pre-COVID. And we know that the distress that's coming along with all of the lockdowns and the social distancing, as well as the weakening of exports and interlinkages with the global economy, means that our labor market conditions are only going to get worse. So that's something that's important to have as a background when we're talking about apprenticeships. Informality has remained stubbornly high, but has grown. And we've also seen a growing precarity in the formal labor market. And I think this is really important to note that even before the crisis, we saw, for example, the share of regular wage workers that did not have a written contract go up from about 59 to 71%. So let's just pause and take a hold of that figure for a second. 71% of regular wage workers pre-pandemic did not have a written contract. This is basically the labor market scenario that we are talking about. And there's many reasons for why the labor market is ailing. Some of it has to do with the enormous scale. So again, we have around 361 million young people between the ages of 15 to 29. This is larger than the entire population of every other industrialized country in the world. Of course, there's macroeconomic factors that also contribute to, the labor market problems that we're seeing. There's misalignments between the way that our education systems and the way that our skills training systems have evolved and the demands of the labor market. There's also a lack of engagement of industry, and particularly, providing enough skills and education that's providing enough alignment with small businesses. All of this is lacking in the way that we educate and train our children today. So against this backdrop, I think it's absolutely imperative to really consider how apprenticeships can come into the picture when we have this widening chasm between education, training, and employment on the one hand, and this growing degree of precarity in the formal market, formal labor market, and stubborn informality. I think apprenticeships become absolutely key. And this practice of complementing academic or vocational study with on-the-job training can help mend, I think, the broken link between education, training, and employment. Apprenticeships are a way to connect youth to potential employers, enabling them to balance income generation with learning. The experience that apprentices gain signal to employers that they're job ready. Third, and very importantly, apprenticeships establish a feedback loop between employers and potential hires. And they also ensure that youth are being skilled in tasks and techniques that are in demand by the market. So really, Sumit, I think what it comes down to is that apprenticeships are an excellent way to start to mend this broken link between education and training on the one hand and market demand on the other. And against this backdrop of growing precarity and informalization, I think apprenticeships done right, and that's key here, apprenticeships done right can actually help more people enter a less precarious form of work and potentially fuel greater formalization. So I'll stop there for now, but I'm happy to elaborate on any of this down the line.
Thanks so much, Sabina, for giving us the entire overview. Definitely very alarming, but we definitely see that it's possibly the apprenticeship which could, as you rightly mentioned, can bridge the link or connect the link between the education and the employment and get things in place. In fact, the very recent report published by UNDP, which suggests that India only has about 21% of the workforce is skilled, unlike, and this I'm talking about in the Indian subcontinent, we are just better than Bhutan, actually. So I think apprenticeship is a way for the organization to look at, and coming to you, what's been your take on the apprenticeship trends which are reflecting in the report?
I need to tie in a little bit with what Sabina has said, because she's given a rather bleak figure of the labor market in India. And of course, we usually assume that the apprenticeship market is something like a sub-market of the labor market. And then when the labor market is weak, the apprenticeship market is going to be weak also. In 2020, we have made the experience that this assumption is not always true. There's been quite a bit of a dip in April and May, which we attribute to the rigorous lockdown back then. But ever since then, apprenticeship contracts have picked up considerably. And we are now at, obviously in India, we've been starting from a very low base, but we have now something like 1.8 lakh contracts in optional trades. We're sure going to reach 2 lakh early in 2021. And in contrast to the general labor market, where employment stagnates, apprenticeship figures are picking up, and this gives us in bleak times an element of hope and confidence that there is something good in the future. In your report, and allow me to congratulate on the report that you have published. It really points to the need for better research into vocational education and training, and especially apprenticeship, and the need for better forecasting, and you fill an important and a significant gap there. The report highlights that there is, as you said, a substantial chunk of organizations which are not aware of the apprenticeship system and do not understand it.
Yes.
And obviously there is a substantial chunk, but on the other side, there are a good number of establishments and corporates and organizations that are aware of the apprenticeship system and are, let me say, cautiously beginning to understand it.
Yes. So there's another statistics here which says that there are 70,000 organizations that are registered on the apprenticeship portal, apprenticeship, but only 23,000 of them are doing apprenticeships, which means there is that gap. While there is an intent from the employers to do apprenticeship, because of which they get registered, but ultimately it's only 2/3 of them are left out.
Which exactly is the segment of establishments that are aware and know about apprenticeship, hopefully understand or partially understand what apprenticeship is all about, but they are not moving. They are not making the step from awareness to understanding to making the decision to issue contracts or take in apprentices. And you can say this is a half full glass of water or a half empty glass of water, but it is exactly the target group of establishments that we need to look at and move and nudge them in the direction of taking in apprenticeship. And as we have seen over the past years, a system like NAPS, especially for the small and mid-size enterprises, can make the difference here. So this is really important, and you have to have the policy initiatives and you have the awareness creation initiatives.
So do you think that right now, is the message right, or is the messaging? Or is there a problem in both the things right now? Do you think people are getting the right message, and is the way the message is getting communicated right, which is understandable by the larger audience?
I believe it is getting communicated right. It may not be getting communicated effectively enough.
Okay.
So this points for example, having something like a Pakwara, which was done in 2019. And I would very much like to see and recommend to institutionalize this and have this on a regular basis, maybe towards the end of the school year, when the young people and their families are making the decisions about what they're going to do in the future. Have a Pakwara that is equipped with the resources that we need for it, and the right media, uses social media, uses conventional media, and reaches a larger audience. That is very important. The other thing, of course, is, as you refer to, understanding. And this is where, in my opinion, the sector skill councils and the third-party aggregators as intermediary organizations would have to come in, because they will have to stand by the side of those establishments that are aware, that understand, but that haven't made the step yet, and inform them very well and very solidly about the technicalities of apprenticeship.
Sure, sure. I think makes sense. Mr. Ranganathan, coming to you, the trend suggests that the large enterprise have a strong projection for apprenticeship hiring, and they continue to do so. In fact, historically, they've been the one who's been, hiring apprenticeship. And however, apprenticeship really haven't taken off for the small enterprises. And even there's a lukewarm response from the medium enterprises, though, as Jan mentioned, that the NAPS, which is the National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme, was launched with the aim to financially support this segment, so that which has a potential to appoint apprentices, but they haven't really kind of caught on to the whole concept. So what could be the possible reason for them to hold them back from doing apprenticeship, and what would be your recommendation to get started?
There are many reasons to me, little reasons. Though we understand that apprenticeship is a good way of getting more manpower that can be trained internally or sometimes trained before they come in, the cost could lower. It also gives time for the organization to evaluate the person before they take them on into their roles. Yet we see an issue, and also this, if you really have to use the demographic dividend, as we call it, we need to have these people in, but we still have issues as far as MSMEs go.
Mm-hmm.
There are issues of compensation. There are issues of skill levels coming out of institutions, of wherever they're coming out. And there are issues of compliance for MSMEs, which they are either perceived or true. Quite a bit is perceived too, that they're afraid to get in there and sign up. You see, what MSMEs do is that they normally take on diploma holders, no more than diploma holders, ITIs, and strangely, I don't know if it has changed now. There are two kinds of apprentices, or many kinds of apprentices, of which two are there. One handled by the Ministry of HRD and the Skill Development Ministry, which focuses on diploma and engineers. The other handled by the states, which are focusing on ITIs. Now, when you look at, there is confusion between the two, but I'll come to that later. When an MSME goes up to the state and signs up with the labor secretary or the labor department, they are a little afraid that they would be followed. I mean, this is something that actually, after you asked me to speak, I spoke to some of the MSMEs, both in the north and the south of India. Mm-hmm. They say that the next visit is from the labor officer, asking many questions. Have you paid this? Have you paid that? Since we don't want to get into this at all. We don't want to get into this problem. So that's one of the issues that is facing. Although to the old act from 2014 onwards, there's a lot of amendments in the, that have been going on to the Apprenticeship Act. We still see this confusion, and there are still a lot of challenges to effectively implement. Of course, there are differences in trade apprentices, graduate apprentices, technician apprentices. Even I get confused. Then vocational apprentices. So whom do we want? And there is a little bit of confusion between these two ministries. For instance, let me look at the Southern Region Board of Apprenticeship. Okay, the Board of Apprenticeship can only sign contracts. It has no teeth otherwise. but it gets signed contracts, but it doesn't skill anybody. So what is happening is they from the original quota of 45,000 apprentices for the south, they were trying to say that don't do more than 15 because we don't have money as budgets. So that's an issue. So when you come to a budgeting issue, then I said, okay, why not MSMEs use this? Then I found that at least in Tamil Nadu, the large public sector units like the electricity boards, Navy lignite corporations, they depend on 400-500 of these apprentices, which the government is funding for their headcount, failing which they don't get a headcount. So they get first priority. The board of apprentices give them first priority. So a bulk of these go away. So if you have a 15,000 apprentice budget, you're already taking away perhaps, I don't know, for example, say 10,000, 5,000. Another 5,000 go into larger companies which have the wherewithal to give them a place to stay, which has a canteen for them to come, which none of the MSMEs have. And they have somebody to handhold them and work under a specific trade, and they have the patience to train them over the next year or so till they are totally totally absorb the culture of the company that they're working for and the work methods. When he comes to an MSME, he doesn't have a fancy canteen. He doesn't even have enough space. So he perhaps has a 3,000 square foot factory, if it's a small industry, not a medium industry, in which 20 people are working. Now, where is he going to take on 10? Where is he going to put those people? And again, when I ask them, how do you train them? He says, no, we are all multi-skilled. We can't put under one person one skill. So we start with menial jobs of carrying this there, carrying that here, and then slowly training them to see how good they are. So there are issues, intrinsic issues. And then comes the question of money. The government says you pay them, and then we will compensate you X amount of money. I don't know, 7,000, 7,500. You guys know it better. Now, that money doesn't come on time. Now, an MSME guy, it's normally a single guy, especially if it's a small and medium industry, a small and micro industry. He's a technician or technical person who's running behind banks. He just doesn't have the time. So he doesn't have the people or the bench strength to train these people. So he preferred to take on guys and hit the road running who are already trained from somewhere else if he can manage to afford that. So there are a few issues here which are intrinsic. I can go on, there are a lot more. But where really people are required and people don't mind, that is in the small NBFCs and BFSI things. And there you don't have a scheme. You don't have a BA or a BSc. Just now, I think they've approached the government, but you don't have the scheme that is running well. And that's where the issue is. So where the technical chaps are, they're a little afraid. And mind you, there is a need. But Tamil Nadu, for instance, we did a study. In Germany, Jan is there. For every one engineer, they have 8 technicians. In Tamil Nadu, for every 2.8 engineers, we have 1 technician. So the engineers are taking the technicians' jobs. So this is where the situation. So when it comes to apprentices in MSMEs, they tend to lose out. First, there's no quota for them. They don't have the money. They don't have the wherewithal. And then they are afraid that the Inspector Raj will start and people will be asked to sort of comply. And mind you, there is a lack of compliance too. They don't pay ESI, PF every month because they don't have the money. They pay once in a few months. They have somehow manage all this. So they don't want that into an open kind of thing. So this is what confusion is all about. But having said that, we could make things a little easier. For instance, why not transfer the money directly to the apprentice from the government? Why do you have to give it to somebody? We have a direct transfer benefit in so many areas. Pick this up. Let's do that. Then why not make apprenticeship a compulsory part of the course, like sandwiched courses? You don't get your diploma or ITI certificate if you don't have a minimum of 6 months to a year of apprenticeship, which could be easily handled as a part of the course. So you don't put pressure on the MSMEs to come up with money, etc. So that's another area. Then why don't we look at large corporations and urge them to pick up somebody and put them into their vendors who are MSMEs? So this is how we have to create a kind of ecosystem where we can generate this kind of apprenticeship, the demand for apprenticeship, and there is a latent demand that exists which we are not filling up. Then there is also I think some of the other areas like the last mile logistics, courier services, hairdressers, these are vital, and they find better jobs than some of the technical people who are, except for three trades: electrician, plumber, fitter, or a welder. These four are somehow managing to sort of stay alive, and even MSMEs are trying are looking for them. So this is where we are. I'll stop now and probably will come back later. So uh, there is an intrinsic demand, but there is hesitancy on one part because of all these issues. Yeah, so
Sure. So, Jan, I think there are a lot of inputs which are coming to you. A lot of points which have been highlighted by Mr. Ranganath, mentioning about
Mostly pointing to deficiencies on the side of the state.
no, but I think what he's also mentioning is about the recommendations. I think that's something which needs to be.
No, absolutely, absolutely. But we should recognize that there are numerous, and maybe the majority of companies who are not looking so much for qualified labor, but they need cheap labor, and they need to have the little skills and not the encompassing skills, and it just doesn't always fit into their corporate strategy, into their HR strategy, and so forth. Yeah, and it is simply not for all kinds of organizations. So therefore, it is also totally, we may regret it, but it is legitimate for companies to say, no, apprenticeship is not for us.
Yeah.
That needs to be recognized.
So coming to that, actually,
not
Sabina,
stigmatized in a negative way.
Sumit, on larger companies, they have this new scheme of learn while you earn. I presume you know that. Because that is much better for them because they are able to give out a diploma. They are taking on people 10 standard pass, and they put them on maybe 500 to 1,000 people. They house them, and the large companies are able to do that. They don't want another culture in, so they actually build the culture. So these people are there for 4 years, and they're able to weed out who's good and who's not. At the end of the 4 years, they give a diploma, and those that they don't want to keep, they let go, and those that they want to keep, they are good trained, solidly trained people. So Jan, why would they take an apprentice if it's a large company? That's what.
I would suggest that that's exactly what Sabina was mentioning. That if the on-the-job training, gets complemented by the theoretical classroom education,
Right.
that adds to it. Sabina, my question to you right now is coming in from what Mr. Ranganathan also mentioned, that there's certain reasons why the employers are not, or from the SME sector are not engaging with the scare, the confusion, compensation, hiring. But we must also realize that they do engage with the apprentice, which is more informally, or I would say more informally engaged with the apprenticeships. That's a huge, like a skilled people available, but yes, they do not get recognized because they're not going through the formal structured process of getting trained. What's your take, and how do we overcome that?
Yeah, but obviously there's so much informal apprenticeship in the informal sector, because that is the way how the knowledge of the older generation gets passed on to the younger generation. We just don't recognize it. We don't see it. It is under the radar. And what can be done, of course, is again going back to the classic instruments of making apprenticeship attractive to them. That means find ways where the management of apprentices can be sourced out to third parties. That means, which includes getting the NAPS money and all this. That means making the funding available and making it available quickly, because having a little bit of extra money, the 1,500 rupees, which goes to the stipend, or the 7,500 rupees, which is a one-time payment towards the basic training. For the MSMEs, that may be a lot of money. For large industries, it's not worth the effort. So this needs to be used to tip them over the point, because many of these are a tipping point, and of course they need not to be afraid of being in contact with the state, which seems to be a perennial condition in India, of course. And but they have to be tipped over the point, and it needs to take the multiplying organizations like the TPAs and the SSCs to do exactly that.
Sure.
And then there is a huge potential for formalization of informal apprenticeship.
Yes.
Yeah. And let's not forget in Europe, it is the small shops that traditionally have used apprenticeship, not the large industries.
Absolutely.
So a similar experience is absolutely envisionable for India.
Yeah. Sabina, what's your take? We'd like to hear from you as well. I know we were discussing this yesterday about it, but would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sumit. And, I think both Jan and Ranganath have given us some really interesting points that I'd like to pick up on. So first, I wanted to just pick up on the point that Jan made, where in many countries and in other experiences, we see that apprenticeships, if the labor market outlook is bleak, then so is the apprenticeship outlook. And in India, actually, it's worth highlighting Jan's point that there's a divergence, that we are actually seeing an uptick in apprenticeships during the COVID period. To me, though, that is not counterintuitive. And the reason for that is around the world, one of the employment saving, job saving strategies that's being deployed is cutting working hours, right? So now if we can actually fill in the limited working hours and then add an education or a training component, that actually works really well in terms of a smoothing impact in light of the crisis, right? Because more people are able to earn some income by working fewer hours. When it comes to youth, they're also being educated at the same time. So actually, in a way, apprenticeships are a good strategy post such a crisis when employment is in crisis. And it's not just a post-COVID. I mean, I started by saying that our labor market has been ailing. And it's actually nice to see that apprenticeships are picking up and should continue to pick up, because it is a way of getting more people productively deployed, right? If not fully employed, productively deployed. And that's really important. So that's point number one that I wanted to make. The second point I wanted to make was, Sumit, to pick up on the UNDP study that you mentioned, that pointed to what a small share of our workers are actually skilled. And if I look at the periodic labor force survey data from 2017, 2018, it says that only 2% of the working age population is actually formally skilled. And if we take informal and formal skills, then it's 8%. Now, myself and a number of other experts have called these figures into question, particularly because we come from a tradition of learning where the Guru Shishya model, or Gandhiji's Nai Talim, which Sumit, you have written about together with Mani, these traditions are actually long-standing, where I would say that a majority of our population is actually skilled. But the question is, and the issue is, that there's a difference between cognitive skills and what we consider to be, the head skills, the high skills, and the people that work with their hands. And this sort of, which other experts have said, a head over hand bias, right? So we consider these people to be skilled, and we don't really value or consider the people that work with their hands to be skilled. And the reality is that a majority of our population actually is skilled, but it's in a vocation, it's in a hands vocation as opposed to a head vocation. So where do we go from there? I think that when it comes to apprenticeships, we need a two-pronged strategy. The one strategy is for those that have a head education, right? So if we look at the education levels among the unemployed, we find that there's actually that there are more people that have higher levels of education that are unemployed, right? Which seems a little counterintuitive, but in fact, it's because the people that are educated are actually able to wait for the right job to come along, right? And where am I going with this? If we can take these people that are highly educated and get them work experience while they are studying, then their channel into the workforce, their channel into a job becomes easier. The study to work transition becomes smoother. And so there's a strategy, the degree linked apprenticeships for those kind of people becomes really important. That's one strategy. On the other side, we need to recognize that a large share of our population, this is why I started with the unemployment, with the informal economy figures, right? A large share of our population actually is skilled in some kind of hands-oriented vocation. And for those people, what we need is an apprenticeship system that is also that has also a recognition of prior learning and certification that's built in into the system very clearly. And this can happen while those people are taking courses through a third-party provider or at an ITI, and linking that very specifically to apprenticeship programs that then also smooths their path from what might otherwise be informal self-employment into potentially working maybe as a higher order entrepreneur or with another employer, but it can smooth their path in that respect. So a two-pronged strategy when it comes to apprenticeships. The last set of points that I wanted to make is, is picking up on what Ranganath was saying, which I couldn't agree with you more, that the apprenticeship law itself, we've been reforming and much needed reforms. But now we need to take the law that we have and actually consider the fact that the implementation of it has been very weak. And the implementation of it now needs to improve. So let's stop talking about more reforms to a law when we haven't even been implementing the good parts of it, right? So how do we improve implementation? I think one major factor, and again, I'm just going a little bit deeper into things that have already been said. One is the translation from center to state, right? There is very little understanding of the apprenticeship law. There's very little understanding of how to implement the advantages, not just among businesses, but also among state governments, right? Whose mandate it is to actually take the education system and bridge it with this kind of skills training and a work experience. So the apprenticeship programs need to be taken on by states. And I think there's a big degree of advocacy that needs to happen at that level. The same is true of the sector skill councils. So the sector skill councils have a fundamental role to play when it comes to apprenticeships. But having done consultations with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and actually NSDC was involved with sector skill councils, one of the repeated pieces of feedback we kept getting from states was, we don't even know who to contact when it comes to the sector skill councils from the state level. Yeah, so Orissa saying, who do we call? It's like, I forget which American president it was that wanted to call the European Union and said, who do I call, right? It's the same sense. So like the state levels don't know actually who is in charge at the Sector Skill Council and how the Sector Skill Councils actually operate at the state level. So that's another thing. And I think that carving out and actually having aggregators that can plug some of these deficiencies is actually really important. But I do think that when we are talking about third-party aggregators, there needs to be a very clear sense of what their role is and what is the regulatory framework that should be governing apprenticeships. And I don't mean tinkering with the law. I mean actually the application and enforcement of the law, sure. Right? And last, I just wanted to bring in also the national education policy because again, we don't know how or what or when it's going to be implemented. But I think what is very unique and important to recognize about this national education policy is its emphasis on the importance of looking at professions, vocational professions as part and parcel of the education system, both at the lower and the higher levels, and making those connections to apprenticeships and the world of work and earning so that we can actually bridge the chasm between education, training, and work. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
No, I think some very valid recommendations made, Sabina, to work on the current challenges, which obviously Mr. Ranganath also made. Evan, I think there's a lot of stuff which has been mentioned, specifically focusing on the implementation part, because a lot has already been done to create the law and make the law more feasible and conducive both for the youth and as well as for the industry. But as Sabina just mentioned about the new education policy, coming here that the guidelines for the degree link apprenticeship has also been set. Yeah, and what would be your recommendation for implementing these degree apprenticeship, considering your vast knowledge and understanding of the German model of apprenticeship, which focus both on the dual stuff, which is both on the education and the on-the-job training?
Yeah, this is very good. And what we call in Germany dual studies and dual universities and dual degrees has started back in the 1970s, and it has been a success story. When we speak of dual degree, dual university, this is not to be confused with the dual system of apprenticeship, because the university comes in as a third actor in addition to the employers and the establishments and the vocational schools. So all these three come together and form a different system. We have in Germany, we have two approaches. One is that there is the apprenticeship plus the university degree. So you have an apprenticeship, a contract between an employer and an apprentice, and the employer says, apprentice, why don't you, in addition to your apprenticeship, also take up a university course with the aim of getting a diploma or a bachelor? Master's is usually not within the scope of this. And the purpose of this is to prepare and groom the apprentice for a further career within the organization. This is the one thing. And the other approach is where you have usually, and for this purpose, companies have created their own vocational academies, which have later been registered and recognized by the state. The other way is that you have universities, and typically these are universities of applied science, which say to their students, student, why don't you, in the order of increasing your employability and gaining practical work experience, also take up an apprenticeship? But you have to search the apprenticeship yourself. Maybe there is an office at the university that helps the student to find these apprenticeship. But under one circumstances, the primary role is that of being an apprentice plus going to the university. Under the other approach and under the other strategy, the primary role is to be a student, but have an apprenticeship in addition to it. Those are totally legitimate. I see the two approaches slowly merging into a comprehensive system. And if I take this as an example for India, I mean that in India, you would have to have the degree apprenticeships as well as the skills universities. Because roughly this would be the match to what I've just described for what had emerged in Germany over a couple of decades. And I would like to see a similar setup in India. So therefore, the new education policy with degree apprenticeships needs to be welcomed. I think it's a good and great step in the right direction. Having 170,000 degree apprenticeships is a start. It may appear to be a drop in the bucket. There needs to be more of this. But at the same time, we need the opportunities for the companies, and these are mostly large companies, to, and this needs to be recognized by the law. There is a point where I disagree with Sabina. It's not tinkering with the law, but a revision of the law needs to recognize the possibilities for degree apprenticeship and skills universities. That's an important thing when the law is going to be revised, which seems to be underway now. But the two approaches, the two strategies need to be there, and they need to complement each other.
Sure. So did there have to be an active participation of the academy as well while doing apprenticeships or degree apprenticeship, which currently has been missing. And likewise, the active involvement of the employers in the education system,
Yeah.
get that connectivity done, right?
Absolutely. It means a lot more organizational work for them.
Yeah.
Because they need to coordinate the apprenticeship and the university study.
Yeah.
But it can be done.
Absolutely, very much. Mr. Ranganath, many employers have realized the potential of apprenticeship to build a strong human capital in last few months. I mean, the report itself indicates that in spite of the COVID situation, there's been a 33% positive outlook for hiring apprenticeship. Do you think that this has really, improved the acceptance of apprenticeship for good, or do you think that it's just a temporary phase, or it's going to now stay on and build on it?
A good question. I just answered that. I would keep my fingers crossed because of the lack of migrant labor and the need to increase the number of people. That is one point. And two, because of the impact on the finances of most companies and to reduce costs, we have learned in COVID that we can live with much less people, much less consumption, much less everything. So I think this has triggered off a thing like saying, okay, why don't we look at some people have been let go and some people have been turned back from wherever they went. Uh, in the formal sector, I mean, if you go down to some of the industries in the south, they were running on almost 60-70% of migrant labor and migrant people. So that's not there. So that has given it a real fillip to engage apprentices because it reduces their cost and it also gets them the headcount. So I do hope that this will be an impetus and they see the good in this and continue with this program and not just go back when it is easy to sort of get somebody from somewhere else. I'm not very sure, but as long as this what you call the sword of COVID is hanging around and pandemics are hanging around, I think this will go on. That is my general feeling, at least in most of the industries that are not so big or not so professionally run. As far as the professional industries go and the large ones go, especially some of the automobile industries, for them, it's a source of very large labor force at a low price. And that's why they have this contract labor. That's why they have this. Is it all kosher? Is it all this thing? I'm not going to get into it because, you saw the trouble that went on in this front. So I'm not getting into that. But hopefully this impetus that has taken place for the good or the bad reasons will continue and we would see more and more apprentices in. But for that, we also need to, there are certain areas that Sabina spoke about. We work in silos. What the center does between two ministries and what the state does, they're all different. Sometimes I find a very funny competition in trying to get numbers. It's not the quality of training. We have trained so many thousand people. And on what? Where are their jobs? What is the outcome? I've been part of these and we offer jobs. We offer jobs to, let us say, we see 8,000 people in a job mailer. We offer jobs to 1,000, 100 join. Because those 1,000, I tell you what, they are from the hinterland. You offer them a job in a large city like Chennai or Coimbatore or Mumbai or Pune, and you offer them the salary, they don't even have enough to eat. Whereas if they go back to their villages, they have a piece of land, they live in their house, they get some money, and they're just there. So there are certain things that we need to do if you look at it holistically. We have to move some of these training programs back into perhaps agri-based industry where they don't have to move out. Smart agriculture, repair of small, they can be entrepreneurs or micro entrepreneurs by repairing tractors, pumps, IoT for agriculture, or even be agricultural officers. There are a lot of engineers who are sons of farmers who go back to their farms who don't want to till the land. So we need to have a very holistic approach to all this, how we are training people. Sabina spoke about cognitive skills versus hand skills. Sabina, let me tell you, hand skills are going to disappear in large industry.
Mm-hmm.
The more and more automation that is coming, the less and less repetitive jobs to do by hand. There are certain cognitive skills that we have to reskill and upskill people. We'll have to know how to program machines and repair machines. I'm talking of large industry. I'm not talking of MSMEs. I'm not talking of, and not because they don't want to have labor, because if you are having a world-class product and you have to have repeatable quality, there is no option for you. And that is happening even in the IT industry. where a number of people are losing a job because there are new bots and new things that are coming up which are able to do things what needed people. So our while we are looking at training and skilling for today, we need to start training and skilling for tomorrow, because they say that almost 50-60% of the jobs that will come in 5 years don't exist today. And that's the rate at which we are changing. If they don't exist today, what are we training people for? And how do we know? We need to look at, I don't know, whoever has a crystal ball, maybe Jan and Sabina, and these are people who are working in that area, say, okay, this may be what is required. I've been talking to HR people. What are you doing for skills that are required 5 years from now? Are you trying to build them from now on? Nobody has an idea. So we're going to have this dichotomy all the time. We'll be training people for today, and that tomorrow the today is useless. So somehow I always said that when you look at training for today, let's get the industry in. One of the suggestions that we said, Sabina spoke about it, I think, where we, same thing as sandwich course, go back to a 5-year engineering course. If you're an engineer, do 3 years, go work for 1 year, come back. For work, the company doesn't pay you. This is a part of your course. Go work and make it compulsory for companies to take people. They don't need to bother because they don't have a payout. It's a part of your course. You're paying a fee. You're learning for 1 year. You get back for the final year, write your exam, write your this thing, which means then you would have picked up skills that are required when you get out. Today, you take a fresh engineer. He has no skills that are required in the corporate world, unless he's done something beyond his education in terms of reading books and writing an exam. Sorry, I'm a little tough about this, but this is the situation that we're seeing.
It's good to hear your opinion.
Yeah, and also the professors have no idea. These two are running on parallel tracks, academia on one track and corporates industry on another track. So we're trying to bring these together. We said, why don't you bring the professors in, not as interns, but embed them into industry for 3 months in a year, just like they do in many other countries. It's a sabbatical for them, but they don't go study, they work in an industry. So what happens then? You're bridging this gap. That is one. And then last thing I would like to talk about between hand and head skills. What are we doing with parents? Parents want their children to get a degree which is not a vocational degree. I'm happy this new education policy talks about degree, which is vocational. We need to embed this from class 8 and see if they have. Most parents think that somebody works by hand. If he works, it's not good enough. And everybody thinks that the best job to get is a government job sitting behind a desk. Sorry, we need to change that attitude, because as long as the parents are pushing, so it's up to us to make all these changes and to bring about a very holistic approach and talking to all the stakeholders. Otherwise, we will be having these issues. I'm not saying that everybody talks to every stakeholder. Each of us have a part, but all these parts have to gel together like a jigsaw puzzle.
Absolutely.
And who's having this overall view? Somebody has to be there saying, okay, this is what we're looking at. We agree upon this. This is the common thread. This is your business. This is your business. And please measure and verify what we are doing so that we have impact on the ground, not numbers on paper. We need to see what is the outcome. So that's what I think we should be doing. So I hope this movement sticks, even though it has come because of COVID. I hope we start improving. At least we are talking, all of us, and now it's time to implement.
Definitely. Sabina, I think you want to say something or add something here.
Yeah, I just very quickly wanted to just add to or contribute a little bit to the future of work discussion, which is, a good chunk of my time is spent actually looking at how quickly the technological trends are upending the way that people live and work, and how this is going to affect industry. And I fully agree with Mr. Ranganath that, for big industry, automation might kind of do away with the trades with the hands, but I do think that there's still a pretty large market for it. And of course, a market for in terms of small and medium enterprises, in terms of, fortunately or unfortunately, self-employment. But the other big thing is also services, right? So the apprenticeship is really important also for the whole services industry, which is only increasing, when we look at the gig economy and so on. In terms of future of work, I think for better or for worse, actually, I think for worse, manufacturing has been really slow to pick up in India. And that, which also means that if automation happens, it's still by international standards affecting millions of people, but relatively in the makeup of our economy is not huge. So I think that the skills of the hand skills, the plumbers, the carpenters, all of that is still very important, and certainly very important with small and medium enterprises, and certainly extremely important in the services sector. But precisely because of the point that Mr. Ranganath made about how quickly technology is upending the way that we live and work, precisely for those reasons, I agree with you, sir, that apprenticeships become even more important because they create that feedback loop. So I just wanted to add a little bit more to what you said.
So quickly, Mr. Ranganathan, because we are
one thing that I probably looking as I'm contradicting myself, but looking at sustainability, I would go back to the world that we were in the past, where we used to repair things and keep them rather than throw away. This throwaway culture is putting a load on this earth. So today we are saying reduce, recycle, refuse. I would say repair. So those skills of individuals who can repair things, who can just don't throw away the whole thing, would probably be a good thing to do, and we should encourage that. That's the only point I wanted to make.
Great. Thank you so much, all of you. I think it was very engaging. We could keep going on and on, but we have to consider the paucity of the time that we have currently. And we have some questions coming in, which we should take up before we wrap up the session. So there's one question, Jan, which comes for you, which says that, do you see the growth, or what is the impact do you see in the growth of apprenticeship if the concept of degree-linked apprenticeship scales?
The growth of apprenticeship at this point is in traditional apprenticeships rather than in the degree apprenticeships.
Okay.
So, so it will set the stage for the degree apprenticeships, but we don't see a direct connection here. But we have in India, we have a paradox, because all the government programs and the initiatives by the business associations and the chamber organizations, they endorse and push apprenticeship, but the general public and many companies are still very skeptical. But the more we see apprenticeships to succeed on the scale of hundreds of thousands, the better we can do to set the stage to scale up apprenticeship into degree apprenticeships and into skills universities. And then we have a chance to move from the 100,000s to the millions of apprenticeships. And this is what I can see. And I see the glass is really half full, not half empty. And we can see that within the next 5 to 10 years in India.
But don't you think that, Jan, that degree apprenticeship would make a whole lot of impact, because it makes aspirational for the youth to take up vocational education because it has a higher education connectivity.
Absolutely.
And because now the employers or the corporates are going to be directly involved in the degree apprenticeship, they are able to build a sustainable and a consistent supply chain for the talent.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. There's nothing that makes it more evident that apprenticeship is not a dead end than degree apprenticeship and the permeability between apprenticeship and higher education.
Okay. Sabina, there's a question which is here. I think you're the right person to answer this. It says, thank you so much for the insightful remarks. I would like to understand if we envision apprenticeship playing a role in creating sustainable and good quality jobs for youth after they graduate. How do they contribute in addressing demand side labor market issues?
Absolutely. I think that definitely apprenticeships play a really significant and important role in creating sustainable and good quality jobs for youth, precisely because they help us address the matching problem, right? So the apprenticeships are not necessarily going to create more jobs. We still need all the demand side interventions that will create more jobs, and macroeconomic policy and so on that will create more jobs. But part of the problem isn't just that our economy doesn't have enough jobs. The problem is that even the jobs that do exist, employers constantly complain that they're not able to find the right workers, and workers complain that they're not able to find the right employers. So apprenticeships are a perfect way to address that side of the problem and create more, more smooth transitions and hopefully better long-term employment opportunities for youth as well.
Great. Mr. Ranganath, there's a question which comes for you, which says that can we make apprenticeship program a mandatory process for completing certification? So
I've always been an advocate of this. For anything that we do, we do not have, our entire education system has nothing to do with applied knowledge. Books and nothing with the hand. We don't even see. And today's engineer sees the lathe on a screen. He doesn't put his hand to it. And that doesn't work. I mean, we need this to be done without doubt. And that's the only way we will change. It'll be a quantum change in the way people think. There's a touch and feel to everything. You need to be there. It's like learning swimming, never jumping into a pool. And that doesn't work. I'm a great swimmer. I don't know how to swim, but I can imagine what to do.
I fully agree with that. And Sumit, I would just add to what Ranganath just said, that then the question becomes enforcement. Right, so you can mandate that everybody has to do an apprenticeship in order to get certified, but then you actually have to make sure that it happens. As of now, our law says that any company that has over 30 employees has to employ a minimum of 2.5% of their strength in apprentices and up to a maximum of 15%. And yet we know that on the upper end, we have maybe 5 lakh apprentices, give or take. Right, so it has to be actually.
Sabina, the law can be changed. We will say that this is a part of the course. The corporate does not have to pay. It's mandatory on them to take, and they will not be counted as headcount. It's a part of a course. They are working along, and it can be changed.
Yeah, and my only point, I absolutely agree with you, sir. And then the only point is that it just needs, the government has to actually make sure that companies are doing it, and training institutions are doing it, and ITIs are doing it, and third-party aggregators are playing the role that they're intended to play. So, yeah.
Great. I'll take a last question here. I know there are many more coming, but restriction of time here. Jan, for you, how are the SSCs able to keep up with the curriculum when in today's world where the technology is changing with the drop of the hat?
That's the only thing to do. The way to go to deal with changing technology is to keep up with curriculum as much as possible. Now, curriculum has to give some stability. If you change curriculum all the time, you don't have to have curriculum anymore. So there is a borderline between having a life cycle for a curriculum which is reasonable, and changing curriculum all the time. So and the SSCs have to do this borderline, and we guide them on this. But optional trades provide this opportunity because you can come in with new curriculum whenever it is needed, and there is a buffet, so to speak, of the curricula to choose from, and some of them, yes, they can be retired, but others are completely up to date. And it's the industries themselves that come in through the SSCs to design these curriculum and make them specific to their needs. Yeah, this is one great advantage that India has over many other countries, where curricula are rather rigid and have life cycles for 10 or 20 years, and they do not recognize the changes. Yeah, I've seen a curriculum for bank clerks in Europe, which does not recognize online banking. Yeah. So that's a good example for what would not happen. But India is much more flexible than that.
Fantastic. Good to hear that.
Yeah.
I think with that, we'll come to an end for the session. Thank you so much, Jan, Sabina, and Ranganath. I think it was wonderful to hear your opinions. Your recommendations are absolutely valid, and we'll definitely take you to the right audience. In fact, Jan being himself here, we have the right audience here itself in our panel to get it started and implemented. Also for the audience, thank you so much for being with us and engaging with us. I think some wonderful questions coming from you. Sorry, we could not take all of them. Just for you to have if you want to have a look at the report, you can go to netapp.in, which is our portal where the report is available, and you can go through the details there. Once again,